Hello readers and welcome back to the Tandem YouTube channel. I'm Lex. I'm here today with another Super Sleuth VIP case file for you, and this month we have been reading Gone by Dreda Mitchell and Ryan Carter. This is a fabulous atmospheric book that has Alison, our main character, with a kind of trifecta of unreliable narrator approach, but also a really strong missing child narrative that's dealt with in a really interesting way. So if you love a missing person trope, if you love an unreliable narrator trope, this is a book that you have to pop on your TBR. First up, of course, we have our interview with our super sleuth, Francesca, your go-to thriller girly. So roll the tape. This is a book that you have to pop on your TBR. First up, of course, we have our interview with our super sleuth, Francesca, your go-to thriller girly. So roll the tape. Francesca, go-to thriller girly, you are joining me once again, and this month we are going to be discussing Gone by Dreda Mitchell and Ryan Carter. First impressions, because this is your first book by this the team. Go.
I really liked it. I thought it was a lot more emotional than the normal thrillers that I read. There was a brilliant representations of grief, I thought, in this one, and that's something that I think can very easily be not done well. I think if you haven't had experiences of grief as an author, I think it's hard to put that into writing. And I'm not sure if these authors have, but it really felt that way. It felt very real and very emotive.
Authentic. It felt like it actually resonated.
Definitely, yeah.
So if anybody is watching and you haven't read Gone yet, let me give you the basic premise. So let me just read what I've prepared earlier. A woman is dealing with the loss of her son, and as it's 7 years since he's been missing, his father is looking to have him declared dead. The mother, however, cannot accept it as she wasn't there when he died, so is simultaneously spiraling out of control whilst also trying to investigate what happened. And I actually have been seeing a lot of missing child books recently, so it feels like this is quite timely. In that trope. It timely in terms of a missing child trope, but also classic in terms of an unreliable narrator trope. Those are the two strong kind of subgenres in this book for me.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there are, as you say, quite a lot of missing child type narratives, and there has to be like an additional layer to it to make it almost stand out and be like a memorable story, as opposed to this sort of like really classic thriller trope that missing child is. So I think the unreliable narrator side of things definitely gives it an extra layer, and the kind of realness of the grief also then adds another layer that really makes you connect with the characters.
Yeah, I agree. So the book before this one was called Girl Missing, and it was about, shockingly, a missing girl.
Really? I would never have guessed.
Complete surprise. But it also had kind of nuanced mentions throughout about race and class and all of these other elements. So I think you're totally right. Girl Missing had that second layer there, and Gone has this second layer of an unreliable narrator trope, which is not unfamiliar to crime thriller readers at all. But tell me what you love about an unreliable narrator trope.
I think unreliable narrators are quite tricky to get right, and Gone definitely gets this right. And I feel like it comes from a place of, why is the narrator unreliable? Like, you have these unreliable narrator tropes that are like, they drink a lot, which I'm not personally a fan of. I feel like it's a bit of a, you're just giving them a reason to be unreliable. And then you have this other side where there's kind of like an amnesia side of an unreliable narrator trope as well, which I don't mind. I quite like those. I think when something really traumatic's happened to them and they've kind of like repressed all this information. But I think what Gone does amazingly, and other books similar, are that you sometimes don't even realize they're an unreliable narrator until you get to the unreliable parts and you're thinking, hang on a minute, I swear they just, and then it just kind of like comes into its own.
I agree. I think Alison Alison is our main character. I think she's got quite a lot of different elements at play. And actually, I think I've been writing a blog post on Gone for Dreda and Ryan for our website. And actually, I think Alison's kind of got this trifecta of unreliable narration, in that she's got this amnesia because she had such psychological trauma from this concept of losing her son, she is also like addling her own brain with drink and drugs to try and get through everything. But then, of course, you've got this massive grief and loss, the fact that her son is not there anymore.
Hmm.
So all of these three things are consistently battling with her in her brain throughout this book, adding to the unreliability of her, which we as readers kind of grasp as we move through. We're like, okay, you've got a lot going on at the moment. Um, and I do think it was done well. I agree with the your mention about, oh, you've just made this person alcohol dependent so that they can
Yeah,
be an unreliable narrator without there being kind of a rhyme or reason to any of it. I
yeah,
think it was done well in this book that there did seem to be a reason for
yeah.
every.
And it also felt like that wasn't the main reason they were unreliable. It was just it was more like an additional reason,
Yeah.
which is, it almost kind of goes lock and key because you're going through all this stress and this trauma and this grief to be the unreliable narrator, but then also it's like this additional layer where you're kind of like, well, do you know what, I don't even blame you, like you are stressed. Like, of course you're probably going to have a glass of wine and try and, you know.
Yeah, I think that that's the thing that I love about an unreliable trope the most, in that I spend half my time, y- with my heart broken for this character, and then I spend the other half of my time, when you watch a horror movie and
Hmm.
a character goes into a room, but they don't look up or they don't look left or whatever. I find myself like screaming at the book, like, no,
Hmm.
what are you
Yeah,
doing?
yeah, yeah,
Come on.
yeah.
And the frustration that you feel as a reader, although most people would describe frustration as a negative feeling, the fact that you get such a powerful emotion from reading a book is insane.
Absolutely. I mean, it's words on a page, and it takes a really special author to make you feel that when you've not got the almost cinematic experience of those additional layers, definitely.
Cinematic's quite a good word to use to describe this book, actually. There are a
Mhm.
couple of scenes, um, no spoilers here, but I am thinking about the piano room,
Mm.
Alison's house, that I think would just translate so well to screen.
Yeah, especially since there was quite a few mentions of the door being closed, the door being open, the door slightly ajar, and I feel like that would work really well. But I also could really picture that. I think maybe my interpretation of that is just as almost exciting as I would see that on screen.
Mhm. Okay, so if cinematic is one of our words that we would use to describe this book, what others are you going with? Like, what emotive words would you use
Mm.
for this one?
Maybe not as emotive, but I would definitely go with atmospheric. I feel
Yeah.
like specifically the beach scenes were, they almost like really reflected what was going on. They were grey, they were cloudy, and that's obviously where our like main tragedy takes place. And a word that I learned in English in school, which I never thought I would use again, but it really was pathetic fallacy of like what was going on. My English teacher's going to be so impressed right now, but honestly, that's the only way I can describe this. You had this really like miserable grey day, and they were trying to make the most of this like holiday, even though it was just a British seaside. And and we've all been there. You go away and the weather doesn't play ball, and that's when this tragedy takes place. It's not like at this like gorgeous sunny coastal town in the south of France where everything's happy and smiley. It really reflects that, and you almost feel like you're there more because of that.
The other thing that I think crime readers love that does appear in this book as a kind of narrative tool is we are following Alison in her investigation, and that is obviously moving forward. But we also do get this like dual narrative with a timeline. We occasionally jump back into Alison's childhood, and we get little snippets of her growing up, her relationship with her father, her relationship with her
Mhm.
sisters, all of these different things that really contribute to that kind of character development. We know who
Definitely.
she is and where she's come from. How do you feel about that kind of dual narrative
Mm.
approach?
Yeah, I feel like this wasn't done in like a classic dual point of view. There was the main narrative, which was kind of like 85%. And then you had these almost like flashbacks, I guess you would describe them as. And I think that really, really worked for this particular style. So you've got the Alison and Olivia scenes when they're younger, and then you've got so much more depth to those characters while you're learning about them in the present tense. I feel like if we didn't have them, I would maybe need a few questions answered about why there was emphasis on specific things. So I think that worked really well. And I also liked the flashback scenes to get to know the kids a little bit more, because you've just got them as adults, being 10 years later from when this tragedy happened. So I feel like knowing them as children and as adults also added a layer of depth, and it also gave the reader something to like hook onto, to like what really did happen that day, as opposed to if you'd only known the story now. I
Yeah.
think you would maybe be like, well, they all just seem, they're all dealing with their grief. Like there's nothing to like really pick at. So I think those 15-20% of the narrative being those flashbacks was, it kind of made this book what it was for me. And I think that extra level of depth, especially for the sisters, I feel like I understood them a lot more.
Yeah. I think I found it in Alison's like forward narrative, in her investigation narrative, that felt almost quite, manic and pacey and
Yeah.
breathless. Like, okay, we're trying to find out these things, we're moving quite fast. And then every time we got a flashback into the past, whether it was with the kids or whether it was even further back to be with Alison as a child, those were a lot slower,
Yeah.
a lot more kind of like set out and relaxed. And it made me feel like I was getting, and this is a good thing, it's going to sound like I'm saying a negative thing, but I'm not. It felt like in those flashbacks, I was getting stuck in the past. Whereas really what I wanted to do was be with
Mhm.
Alison, racing forward in her journey. And I think that element of being like, quote unquote, stuck in the past
Yeah.
for Alison is a really just interesting kind of play with
Yeah.
pace throughout the whole book.
Yeah, and I think especially because it's kind of true that she's almost stuck in the past in the main narrative. So that's interesting that, like, as readers, we would see the other part. But as you say, it sounds like, why would you want to be stuck? But I absolutely loved those chapters. I feel like they almost gave me like chance to breathe and like build the characters in my head a little bit, instead of it being this more fast-paced
Mhm.
narrative towards the truth.
Yeah, that makes total sense. You kind of needed a break from the main
Yeah.
narrative to catch your breath, whereas I was like, no, 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 Alison, let's go. We're on it. Let's go. Let's go. Okay, so let's talk about the. We're not doing any spoilers. We don't do spoilers in these videos, so you can listen to us for the whole time without, being worried of being spoiled for anything. This book does have some twists and turns,
Hmm.
but I feel like all we can really say, and Francesca, you can definitely add to this, is maybe that they just don't come when you think that they might come.
Yes. And I love books like that, because you're so used to picking up a thriller and waiting until the 90% mark for something huge to be revealed. And I think it takes a lot in an author to be able to have those twists throughout the narrative, especially towards the start of the narrative, which was absolutely wonderful, to really throw you off. And it was one of those books that kept you gripped because of the plot twists throughout it, if not for a
Yeah.
better word. Plot twist sounds too basic for like what I'm trying to describe,
No,
but
I know what you mean.
obviously there's no spoilers here.
I feel like for a plot twist to really land and to really resonate with a reader, your readers have to care about the characters and the situation and the stakes. And that obviously makes sense as to why most twists and reveals might be at the end of the book, because you've
Mhm.
spent the whole narrative building up these characters and making your readers care. Some authors, this is a prime example, but also you and I love I Let You Go. So
Yeah,
that absolutely cannot go unmentioned. Some authors have this amazing power of being able to make you care about a character in such a short period of time
absolutely, yeah.
to then put in an early twist, and you're still just as gagged as you would have been had it have been at 80% in.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so we have done our love for unreliable narrators. Now let's talk about our love for missing child narratives. So it sounds like such a strange thing to say, and like the
Mhm.
worst thing you could potentially wish upon a human being. Why do we
Absolutely.
love reading about it so much?
I know. I feel like because there's this extra like level of care, like as a human being, for children over adults that have gone missing. Like obviously, it's all sad. We don't want anyone to go missing, but when it's a child and you see the people around that child almost grieving their absence before they even know what's happened, it just gives you just feel stronger emotions around it, I think.
I think it's because the stakes are immediately higher, right?
Yeah,
If an adult
absolutely.
goes missing, obviously that's horrific and tragic, but you also know that they are an adult.
Hmm.
So they can kind of, engage brain, use
Yeah.
common sense, and if they are in a situation where they can get themselves out of it, they will try. Whereas with a
Yeah.
child, depending on how old they are, you've got no idea what they're capable of or how they're going to manage their way through a situation.
Yeah.
Have you got recommended missing child narratives for us?
I certainly do. Hide and Seek by Andrea Mara is like a missing child story, quite similar to Gone. It's like the parents turn their back and the child is just completely missing. But I feel like this is another one that does it really well in terms of the emotions surrounding it. And I think maybe slightly differently to Gone, there is a lot of people in this book that really, really care about this missing child. In Gone, there's a smaller pool of characters that we're kind of thinking about, and what are their motives and what are their intentions. But in Hide and Seek, there's probably 25 characters, maybe 20, that are all like equally on this mission, and they're adults and children, similarly to the narrative that we're talking about. But I feel like there really is something about this, and this
Mhm.
one also leans in, like we're talking about, like the extra layer that's needed in these types of stories, and this really leans into like the dual point of view
Mm.
aspect. So you've got a missing child in the current timeline, and then you've also got flashbacks to a missing child in a previous timeline. So you're kind of like, what is happening? And I think this was another one where there was a similar-ish twist quite early on, where it was like an identity who's who situation, and that also really gripped me. So this is one that I think, if you enjoyed this, read Gone. If you enjoyed Gone, read this.
Yeah, I love Andrea Mara, and I think just like Gone, Hide and Seek, it is a missing child narrative,
Hmm.
but it isn't that very classic.
Yeah.
Here is a mother and a father. They had a child and that person went missing.
Yeah.
Like there are so many different elements to it.
Yeah, and I think that's probably why it kept me as gripped as it did. There was almost like some little subplots kind of happening at the
Mhm.
same time, which I very much enjoyed.
So my missing child narrative recommendation will actually be a very recent read for me. So it is Close Your Eyes by Teresa Driscoll.
Oh,
I've got it. Here we go.
here's one I prepared earlier.
Here's what I prepared earlier. So it's this cover.
Okay.
And actually, I would say that this is a very classic. Here is a mother and a father, they have a child, and the child goes missing narrative.
Hmm.
The reason that this one stands out so well for me is because the mother has, not actually dissimilarly to Gone, she has what I can only describe as what I think would be a very natural response. She
Hmm.
has a complete breakdown. She has to be sedated because the stakes are so high. She was on her own in the town when her little girl went missing,
Hmm.
and that panic and, just utter complete at a loss of what to do is so, so strong in this book.
Yeah.
The interesting, like, second layer that we keep talking about in this one is that the husband is a police officer.
Oh, okay.
So he is dealing with his very emotional and, understandably
Hmm.
emotional wife, whilst in his brain, all he has is, oh, well, if we don't find her in 24 hours, if we don't find her in 48 hours, if we don't find her in 72 hours, these are the
Yeah.
stats, the numbers, these are this. And he obviously then cannot be involved in the investigation.
Yeah.
But that's what he does for a living, so he's so used to it.
Yeah.
This would be a standout missing child narrative that I've read this year for sure.
Amazing. I think as well there is something in that, when the child goes missing and the mum or the dad, in whatever book you're reading, does have that real, like, visceral, almost like physical reaction to their
Yeah.
child being missing. I think when you were talking about that, it did remind me of another book. We could just talk about them all day, couldn't we, realistically? Let me find it on my wonderful shelves there. I don't know if you've read Little Secrets by Jennifer Hillier.
And do I need to
This
add it to the
You
list?
absolutely need to add this to your list. This is like a missing he's a missing boy, he's 5 years old, but that's just how the story starts, and then it just spirals into this absolute chaos. So this is like a missing child story at its core, but
Mm.
there is like, there's not just an additional layer, there's like an additional 5 layers to this of like
Okay.
other things that are happening. But he's just at a market with his mum, and the mum turns the back for like 10 seconds to like pay at the till or whatever, and he's just gone. Um, but as she's an American author, it's a little bit Americanized. So I feel like that is maybe the difference between this being slightly more something that you can feel yourself being in as people live in England, versus this feels more like fiction. I don't really know how to how better to
Mhm.
describe it. But yeah, I think this is what we're saying. There's so many missing child stories. It takes a lot for it to be a standout.
Yeah. That is not the book that I thought that you were going to get from your shelves.
Which book did you think? We can go again.
It's like Lucky Dip, isn't
Yeah.
it? No, on the theme of missing child narratives done differently, I thought you were going to pick Shari LaPena.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's a brilliant one. That is a brilliant one.
So that example closed.
Okay, hold that thought. I'll just last
Oh.
one, I swear. I get a lot of questions being like, how do you know where these books are on your shelf since they're color coordinated? And I don't know how else to tell you apart from I just do. Everyone, this is the one you mean, I assume.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in this, the child goes missing after the dad comes home in this like rage of all these like emotional things he's going through. Won't go into details. And she goes missing, but she's like 8 or 9, so she's a little bit older, which I think changes your how could this play out. And this was really a missing child story on its own. Everyone in the whole neighborhood is like looking for her, what's going on. And I think this is a twist they've never seen done before. This is I'd say this is my favorite Shari LaPena book purely because of how different it is. And I think the ending was also really rewarding in this.
The main difference for this one, for me, is that it's all set now, like within
Yeah,
about, I don't know, maybe a week or 2 weeks of the
yeah.
child going missing. Whereas so many of the other narratives that we've talked about do have that back and forth through time elements.
Yeah, because normally they're like, 7, 8, 9 years later,
Yeah.
the actual now narrative is being told from after the child's been missing for a really long time. But I think,
Mhm.
yeah, this one just kind of plays out as like as is,
Yeah.
the day, the next day, the next day.
So bringing it back to Close Your Eyes, but also to Gone, one of
Mhm.
the scenes that usually happens in missing child narratives, in like very typical missing child narratives, is that one parent has to then tell the other parent that the child is missing. Like in Close Your Eyes, the mother takes her child shopping. The child goes missing while she's shopping, and
Mhm.
then she has to call her police officer husband and say, she's gone.
What a
Obviously,
horrendous phone call to make.
right? I think that scene in itself, as a writer, just must be one of the hardest things to write in the world because how do you even say those words?
Mm.
Obviously, in Gone, we don't know what anybody knows. We don't know what the truth is. We don't know who's lying to who, or if people are lying, or if it is a mystery, or if it is just as we're being told, this boy went missing at
Mhm.
sea. And I think that's part of the thrill of it is that there isn't necessarily that scene where we are told this is what happens
Yeah.
and that's the story.
Yeah, I really like that as well. I think it is, again, it just puts a different spin on a missing child story. The fact that we as the reader don't even know
Mm.
what's going on. As you say, like if somebody's having to tell spouse, it makes sense because you're kind of living vicariously through them and being like, okay, you're kind of telling the reader at the same time. Whereas with Gone, no one is telling us what is going on. You have to purely infer what is going
Mm.
on.
And kind of do like your own mini investigation alongside Alison, being the reader who can take into consideration her unreliability,
Yeah, absolutely.
which I personally quite enjoy.
Me too.
Now that we've worked our way back to unreliability, what is your have we done this? Have we done our unreliable recommendations?
No, I don't think so.
My own brain is becoming unreliable. You go.
That's the biggest plot twist. You are the unreliable
Yeah,
narrator of this
shock.
video. My recommendation would be, and it's not one that I see people talking about a lot, but it is one that really needs to be on people's radars. And I love giving recommendations where they're not like these huge popular books that, you know, everybody's talking about. But it is The Secrets You Hide by Kate Helm. And this is an author that's only published a couple of books, so isn't really sort of on many people's radars. But this follows a woman who is a courtroom artist, which is quite a nice different perspective as it is, but she can like see evil, so she's in these courtrooms doing these drawings and she kind of almost infers if somebody's evil or not, and kind of depicts the drawings that way. But that's really just where this starts. This goes down a number of rabbit holes, but mainly the fact that she has this almost, it's not spiritual, it's not like paranormal, it's just like this sense almost of like, and that's kind of where our unreliability comes from, and whether she should trust that or trust kind of what's in front of her. But also a lot of this story is set on the coast in England, which I think is quite it really it was the first book that came to mind when I was thinking of similar books to go on for people if they want to take another recommendation. And it just really worked for me. It was something really different, and it was an unreliable narrator that again isn't alcohol dependent for the sake of being alcohol dependent, and it was a bit of a different spin on that trope. So yeah, very much enjoyed this.
Great. Well, in a complete opposite direction, I am going to recommend Insomnia by Sarah Pinborough.
Okay,
Have you read this one?
I haven't, but I'm familiar with the author and her style.
So, concept of the book is I think this woman is about to turn 40, and oh, people are going to come for me in the comments because I'm going to get this wrong now. She's about to turn 40, which is the age that her mother died.
Okay.
So she has this kind of internal panic about turning 40, and she stops being able to sleep a few
Okay.
weeks before her 40th birthday. And you see her descend into the madness that that brings. And there are just certain scenes where it's this woman in her house on her own with only her spiraling thoughts and insanity to keep her company that were very reminiscent of Alison's journey in her book, in her house. Both books do go in very different ways at the end.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are craving that kind of unreliable, like your mind playing tricks on you kind of character, then I think that you would also love Insomnia by Sarah Pinborough. I think the more I was trying to think of a recommendation for an unreliable narrator, is that you either go down the unreliable for reasons that you haven't inflicted, or you're almost like unreliable by choice.
Yeah.
Like when we think of the amazing Amy character from Gone Girl,
Mm-hmm.
she is kind of unreliable by choice.
Yeah.
Like everything that she says, we're like, okay,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
But yes, can confirm Alison, very unreliable, not by choice, interesting to follow.
Definitely. Interesting. Yeah. Great word.
Okay, so we have done unreliable narration, we have done missing child narratives, we have done dual timeline tropes. Literally, what more could you ask for in a good book? Francesca, why don't you wrap us up by giving us your one-line review?
So Gone is a brilliant, dark, emotive, and layered thriller that plays on the aftermath of grief in a very atmospheric beach location.
Smashed it.
Okay.
Perfect.
Heard it here first.
You did. And on that note, we will leave you to the next interview, which will be myself plus Dreda and Ryan. The book is available with a Kindle subscription. So if you have it, it is available in KU. But if you prefer a physical, then you can order it online now because it is out. And I recommend it. If you are still here, viewers, thank you so much for sticking it out with us so far. Next up, I have an interview for you with Dreda and Ryan themselves. But I will have to say, apologies for the next footage. Something has gone wrong on our Zoom, so you don't actually see me at all in this next clip. You just see Dreda and Ryan, and let's be honest, that's what you're here for. That's what you want to see. So whilst you will still hear me, you will only see them. So stick around because that interview's next. Well, welcome, Dreda and Tony. Thank you so much for coming to hang out with me this afternoon. How are you?
And we're great, we're
Very
wonderful,
well. Very
and
well.
we're not sure when this goes out, but the sun is shining in London, so we're always happy when the sun's shining. Yes.
The sun is shining here, and long may it rain. I'm
Yes.
ready for this to just turn in from spring straight into summer.
You'll be
That'll
so
work for me.
happy. Wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't it?
So we are recording this in the middle of the Thrills and Chills read along for
Woohoo.
Gone. All of our creators, I think they're on, where are we? So day 5 we are
Day 5.
currently on.
Yep.
But for those who haven't read the book, do you guys want to give us an umbrella pitch, an elevator pitch for this one?
Goodness. Oh my goodness me. It's so hard sometimes when you're thinking about
Yeah.
the books that you're in. But basically we have Alison, who is our lead character, had a great tragedy 10 years ago. One of her sons, something happened to him on a day trip out, very innocent day trip out to see at the beach. And she's never got over that. And there's always a niggling sense in her what really happened, because they didn't recover his body as well out to sea. And what's been chucked into the mix now is her ex-husband, who is the father of her son who she lost, Sam, Mark. He's married again. He's got kids. You can imagine what that might make her feel like. And he wants to have their son, Sam, declared dead now, officially, because he really wants to literally, physically move on. And she doesn't want that. She is convinced something happened. And that's what this story is about. It's about Alison and her family trying to find out what happened on the day at the beach, what happened to her son Sam.
And she can't accept he's gone, hence the title.
Gone.
Mhm.
Yeah, she can't accept he's gone. Yeah, absolutely.
And obviously, we will do no spoilers in this chat. But can I just say, the way that you planned out the introduction of characters and the reveals within the first 60 pages, masterful.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you.
Just the way that you open up the story and the way that you get us into the heads of these characters. Both Francesca and I had a conversation off camera, and we were both just sat there, mouths open, like,
oh, good. Oh, good. Oh, good. Oh, good. I mean, one of the things we can say that's in this is there's piano music, and the piano is very, very important. And I think it's just something that we found when we've been writing, is that art and things that are created just seem to become important for our stories and our kind of characters. They're a bit more offbeat. And it was really an important thing for me, because when I was growing up, I grew up on a working class estate in the East End of London. I still live in the East End of London. And back in my day, we had something called the Inner London Education Authority, the ILEA, rather than they were broken up into different boroughs like they are now. And their big thing back then was every child should learn a musical instrument. Every working class child should learn a musical instrument. So I used to play the guitar, me and my brothers. My sister, she tried, let's say, to play the violin, which was not such a great sound sometime. But the intention was kind of there, and we kind of used that in the story as well. So bringing in those bits of piano, the piano was for me really, really important, which is what I love about the crime genre. You can bring in so much, so many different things. It's such a broad church of what you can do in terms of storytelling, telling a story and making it thrilling as well.
It's too big to be a genre. It's just so, it encompasses so many things.
God, I completely agree. And especially with the inclusion of music in Gone,
yeah,
it adds a kind of cinematic added like horror to it. Like it's panic inducing.
Yeah.
You just hear this kind of tune playing in the background, and sometimes you do actually tell us what song is playing, which I think makes it even creepier, because we can go and play it on Spotify and listen at the same time.
Yeah.
But there is that like slightly horror film feel about it when you can just hear this like eerie piano playing off in the background, and you're just like, something is going to happen.
Yeah. I think so. I often think of Tony, you might want to expand on this a bit more. All that kind of, so Tony likes quite a lot of German stuff from the 1930s. It kind of had that feel about it.
You're making me sound boring.
No.
All inspiration is good inspiration.
Yeah, I mean those. I mean, horror's not really my genre, but I think you pull in bits of other genres as well.
Yeah.
And the way that the Germans back in the day used to freak people out is
Mhm.
a useful reference point for when you're like trying to incorporate some of that yourself. So yeah, you probably did. I mean, certainly in the past we've done similar things in shapes bent out of shape. And,
I always think of Nosferatu. You know, exactly. I mean, when you think that film was made how many years ago, and it still kind of freaks you out, and you think of piano music. And when we were thinking of it, one of the bits of music we wanted to have in it was the Bells of Moscow, Rachmaninoff. And you were the one that told me, is this right, that he got that from one night he had a dream that, do you want to finish?
I think it was based on a dream, based on a nightmare. Yeah, he's
not but what the nightmare was, wasn't it? It was about a coffin. It was
his own funeral, I think.
It was his own funeral.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, whether it was German inspiration or your own kind of magic that you were pulling from, this is so atmospheric as a read.
Or we're creepy.
Yeah, or you're just downright creepy, which is also fine.
Yes, yeah, there's always that.
So let's talk about Alison. You mentioned she is obviously dealing with a huge amount of grief and loss, which, you know, represents itself in different ways throughout the book.
Yeah.
How was that as a writing experience? I imagine it must be quite, you know, intense as a writer to write such devastating things.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because the experience of feeling like you're guilty for something that you're not actually guilty of, or you're not responsible for, it's quite a painful thing, but you can have it at a trivial level, you know, you've let somebody down or something. A mother to feel that she's lost her son and she was partly responsible, it's kind of like that emotion expanded to the maximum, really. So you can think that's probably a little bit what it's like, but just imagine if it was a human being that you'd lost and you felt in some way responsible, that is going to be a really, really difficult thing. So you try and build on how you would feel if, I don't know, you'd let a friend down or something and you felt that was your fault. How much worse would it be? So you have to exaggerate the emotion that goes with that. I think that's kind of what we were thinking of.
But a bit deeper than that, because, you know, grief in our own personal life has come to us in the last couple of years quite a few times. And so we've had to kind of deal with grief. And when you kind of deal with grief and it feels a bit kind of continuous, it's unexpected. I think we were able to really use our own personal emotions to get and put them into Alison. And then if you factor in, this is our own child. This is a human being she carried for 9 months. She had dreams for him. She loved him. She cared for him. And suddenly he's not there. And so it is that also about grief as a parent, but grief on a kind of a universal level. Somebody's not there. And 1 minute they were and they weren't. How do you deal with that? How do you deal with that? That was one of the big things. So I agree with you on one level, Ryan. But I think we did use our own personal experiences a lot in this book.
Although the difference is, I think, slightly, we're not parents. And every parent I've ever met, their biggest worry is something happening to the children. This is what they all worry about. Not necessarily death, but something bad happening to the children.
More than themselves, isn't it?
Much more than themselves. It's a kind of responsibility they take with them through life, really.
Yeah.
Well, that's what really changes your approach to the missing person trope, right? Yes, it's a missing person narrative, but more than that, it's a missing child narrative, which, you know, as you say, like, I don't have children, but I can understand that the worst thing to happen to a person would be the loss of their child. It is, of course, every missing person is devastating, but a missing child is a new level of trauma, I think.
Of course.
Burying your own child. Yeah, that's what.
Yeah.
Or not being able to bury your own child. That's kind of even worse.
Not
isn't
knowing
it?
what really happened.
The not knowing, are they still out there? Aren't they still out there? What's happened to them? And I think mixed in with that grief is the other G word, guilt. She carries such a lot of guilt around with her. And I can just imagine Alison will be one of those parents who would be saying, what if this, what if that, what if I'd stayed here, what if I, do you know, all those what questions.
Be a family syndrome.
Exactly. So I think there's a tremendous amount of guilt. And I think it's almost her having to cope with that guilt that I
Mhm.
think drives her to be the type of person that she is, drives her to have some of what she puts in place as a coping mechanisms, regardless of whether they really help her cope
Yeah.
or not. A whole interaction with the world, and actually a whole interaction with her existing son. I remember seeing this documentary many years ago. Let me say this very quickly, where
Mm.
one child had gone missing in this family, and the family had become obsessed with finding him. It was a very, very famous case, and their second son had been growing up all this time, and this is a well-known story. And their second son, he became a serial killer, and when they asked him why did he do it, he said, I did it to get my parents' attention. They forgot all about me. They
Wow.
forgot all about me. It's that kind of powerful thing. So with Alison, she's wrapped up in Sam. What does that mean about her relationship with her existing son,
Mhm.
Kane? We found that actually was one of the genesis of us writing this book. Isn't that right,
I
Tony?
think so. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of. I mean, you don't. Yeah. I mean, I think that's true, but I think it is the whole. I mean, I've always found it fascinating, the whole you make one silly mistake in life and you pay for it forever. And you think
Mm.
that was so silly and so trivial, really. I mean, in the book, it's just because she decides to go and do something else, somebody's looking after the children. But just stupid things like that, and a stupid decision you make when you're driving a car, or a stupid decision you make when you take the family out somewhere that they probably shouldn't go. It's just silly things, and you think
And
that.
sometimes a decision that is seconds or minutes.
Yeah.
It wasn't anything that you put any length of time
No,
into.
That's right. And
no.
any other day it would have all been different.
And I think that's
Mm.
why I think that's why we also describe our work as domestic
Mm.
thrillers as well, because this is what you do. It's what people do every day of their
Yeah.
life, everyday decisions that just morph into something you just would not expect. Because I don't think she makes a mistake. I think
No,
she does
no.
she should be happy to have left her son with people who be able to care for him.
Yeah.
And then when she comes back, the situation is completely changed. What person wouldn't do that with people? What person wouldn't just allow their child to be looked after by people that their own family with regards to whatever happened. They've given her an explanation of what actually happened, but then she starts to think, I made a mistake. Whereas
Of
in reality,
course.
she didn't make a mistake, did she? At all?
No, I think I'm quite a type A person. So where I can really resonate with Alison is that she's already had to be convinced to go off and do something for her
Yeah.
whilst she is putting her children in the care of someone else. And then when she returns, she's given the situation and she says, this is what's happened. This, I would exactly just as Alison does, be forever going, but I wasn't there. So
Yeah.
I didn't see it with my own eyes, so I don't know.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm in too much of a shock to listen to what people are saying or what people are telling me.
Exactly.
Or what really happened. I need to find out what really happened. I think what I find interesting in what you have just said is she had to be convinced as a person to take time out for herself.
Yeah.
And the thing she takes time out to do, I think, is wrapped up in another type of grief that she had from her childhood in relation to some trajectory and journey she was on that she was not able to complete because, once again, somebody needed her and she had to look after somebody else. So why shouldn't she take that time out? So I'm rooting with her, but so much damage has been done in the meantime. Is she going to be able to find out the truth? And it's not even just that. Is she going to be able to deal with the truth that she finds out?
And that's where our readers meet Alison. We meet her for the first time 7 years into what I would kind of call this trifecta of how she's become this unreliable narrator trope. Obviously, she is dealing with such a deep amount of grief and trauma. She's also kind of self-medicating in a way that she can get through day to day doing. But then also she has this physical or like mental block in her brain that her brain won't let her think about things or does let her think about certain things. And then, of course, because of all of these things, her sleep schedule is wildly off. So
Yeah.
all of these things come together, and all of a sudden you've got the perfect unreliable narrator with all of these reasons as to why everything that she thinks and everything that she's going through and kind of investigating in her own way gives readers pause.
Yeah. You know, can you trust this person
Mm,
because she's
Can
the
she
way
trust
she's doing it?
herself? Yeah.
Say that again.
Can she trust herself?
That's right.
yeah.
No, I mean, it's a kind of a funny thing, really. When you write these kind of books, everyone's telling her, look, why don't you get over it and move on? I mean, not
Mm,
as crudely as that, but that is actually quite good advice. Why aren't you getting over it and moving on?
Yeah.
Your son's not coming back. And it's that kind of scenario where, I mean, what everybody is telling you is actually true.
yeah.
You know, you need to cope and deal with this. You know, just refusing to have him officially declared dead because you can't accept that he's gone or you don't know what happened. And on one level, it's kind of, even deep down, I feel, so I don't know whether we put this in there, but there's a little bit of her thinking to herself, if I'm going to have the rest of my life and I'm going to be useful to my family and other people that I know, I do need to move on, really.
Mm,
But she needs the truth in
But she
order,
needs the truth in order to do
or an
that.
attempt at least to try and find the truth. And I think good on Alison, because this is a real, you know, that we need to have him officially declared dead is a real
mm,
trigger moment. It's a real kind of, oh my goodness, if I'm never going to do this, this is the time to actually get on and do it. But she's got so many stumbling blocks, including
mm,
herself, including sometimes how she approaches life, what she's kind of come to depend on in order to get on with life. And I find that really, really real, because so many of us, we get knocked by
mm,
things you would not expect to get knocked back by. And in order to get back up, sometimes you can't do that on your own. You
yeah.
need an assistance from something. And with, I think, quite a lot of people, it's a kind of some type of medication, drink, maybe some kind of drug, whatever, something that needs to pick them up. And that sounds good and well, but the problem is those things that you need to pick you up become very
Mm,
addictive. And it's, even though you might want to part company with them,
yeah.
it's not that easy. And so for me, one of the big things that I loved about writing Gone and Alison's journey was seeing, can we get Alison to the point where she starts to think, you know what, I can stand on my own 2 feet. I don't need these kind of substances or these other kind of strategies that really essentially are holding me back. So the first thing I need to recognize is they're holding me back. Second thing is, how do I get rid of them, and then get rid of them? Because I think what essentially we love in terms of those character arcs for some of the women that we write about is they start in one place and we want to see them end up somewhere else. I want to see Alison to be the kind of strong Alison she was when she was a child, and
Yeah.
she was on that trajectory with the kind of career that she feels and I feel she was meant to have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting as well, when she sets out on her journey, she's not expecting to find foul play. She's just trying to find anything to stop her husband, just throw any doubt at all on the fact that he might actually have been lost. That's all she wants to do, is stop him declaring dead. And it's only along the way, when she's desperately trying to find anything to stop him doing it, that she starts to realise, I don't really know what happened at all.
Yeah, exactly. What really went on the beach that day?
Exactly. I think that's one of the most interesting things about Alison, is that she is an unreliable narrator to the reader, but she is also coming to terms with the fact that she doesn't have the hard facts. So she knows that she is entirely unreliable. And it's that inner doubt in everything that she does.
Yeah, I mean, it's what she's doing is logical from the position that she's in. It's not random. It's logical where she starts.
And
so,
and she, I think, after a while starts to recognize that people might have told her things, but because of the state she was in, she didn't absorb some of that information. So she's got to go back and try and find that information again. That makes a lot of sense to us. Can you imagine, you've lost a child? You're not going to be taking everything in, including some really important information. And she recognizes she's lost some of that important information. And that's why I really love the character Paul in the book, the former liaison officer. She needs someone who was there at the time who might have that type of information. So we had I really liked him. I just really liked him. Probably give us a bit of a spoiler, but I really, really like Paul, because very often you might have a police person, but we wanted someone who had been there, but they were retired now, so they could give some time. And they were very, very sympathetic, because it turned out had their own backstory about why that work was very important for them, why finding out about Sam was very important for him as well.
I think the inclusion of Paul actually was really genius, because you get to have his narrative as a family liaison officer that brings in police strategy and investigation without actually having to turn your whole narrative into a police procedural book.
Yeah.
I think that's true. I mean, I personally like to keep the involvement of the police in these kind of books down to the minimum possible.
Yeah.
I mean, really, you really are flogging a dead horse with police officers who. What exactly are you driving at, Inspector, and all this kind of thing. It's a bit difficult to do anything original at all with that. So but I mean, you do, the police would have been involved, the police will be involved, and they usually are in these situations, so you can't avoid them entirely.
I think it's something that crime books that are coming out nowadays are using, which I really love, is a character that isn't from the police. It might be like I was just reading a book about the other day about a court transcriber, or there's always another way of bringing a character in from an interesting point of view that you can use, and that feels like really new and exciting within crime writing.
Although we haven't had a good Private Eye for a while, maybe that's a genre that could be revamped.
Maybe, but there's all these different things that people are kind of doing and looking at, like the court transcriber, the person who takes the 999 call. No, there are lots of other different types of personnel who work for the police, but they're not actually the police. We've got a friend whose son, he's not a police person, but he works in forensics, and he does a lot of that stuff on the computer, and he knows that. So there's such great characters that you can kind of involve in those type of books now. And I think we saw Paul as one of those characters as well. I liked, we wanted him to be retired. We wanted him to have a kind of a bit of a laid back coolness as well about him. We didn't want him to be the stressed out figure, because she's already stressed out. So we need the person who's working with her to kind of balance that kind of stress as well. And
that's exactly what it is. It's the yin to her yang of being like, okay, if we follow two very like out of breath manic characters, then it might be too much. But because we have this perfect balance, then it's ideal.
Exactly. And he can go off and do stuff for her and come back and, adjust and draw things back. He can be a connection back with the police. It was because when we first started writing it, he wasn't there as a character, was he? And it's only as we started writing it, we thought, no, she's too alone. We need another kind of character, but he's got to be a useful character. He's got to be a yin to her yang. And that's how Paul was created.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so now I'm going to ask potentially easier questions, but also maybe put you on the spot a little bit. Just so you can think ahead, I am going to ask about your reading recommendations and what kind of books you guys are loving to read. So think about that in the back of your head. But first, you are the only kind of book from our Thrills and Chills book club that is co-authored, duo-authored under the umbrella of Dreda St. Mitchell and Ryan Carter. I remember talking to Nikki French, who, spoilers, listeners, if you don't know, is two people. And we kind of came to the decision that she was Nikki, he was French, and they both worked together under the job title of Nikki French, as it were. What does that co-authorship look like for you guys?
Oh gosh, do you know what? So I say this to people, we met in a creative writing class at Goldsmith University. So it's always been the thing that's been between us, it's been the glue that's always been at the kind of heart of our relationship. So when we actually started to write together, it felt very, very, very natural. It wasn't, and we do a lot of, initially we do a lot of talking together. We're plotters. We think if we can plot as much of the story as possible. I might be better at the story, some parts of the story than Ryan. And like, I really like to deep dive a lot into the characters and the character emotions, where I would say you like that as well, but you're much better at twists and turns. I don't know where to find some of these twists and turns, but I suspect it means he's got a very manipulative mind, you know, and stuff.
It's more that because of the background you come from, you like straight talking and frankness, whereas I'm more of a devious and
mysterious character.
Yeah.
What I would say is that Ryan has done lots of reading. You don't tend to read fiction the way that I read fiction. You do, but it's a lot of stuff that's Russian and German from the 19th and 20th century, and you do a lot of factual reading. So we work well together. So there's loads of contemporary stuff I know that he might not know. So we're just a great kind of a mashup. We don't write physically together. That could never happen. Ryan has to have his own office. I have my own office. And we kind of get on with things. And we write at different times of the day. So I'm an early bird. I get up after 6, do my stuff and get on with my writing, and then by 2 or 3, that's it, game over for me. Whereas about 2 or 3, you're kind of literally waking up in his head, and he'll go off to do writing into the evening and into the night. So it really, really works, actually.
I mean, I would add, it's not that I'm someone who just likes to read German or Russian books. It's that if you read contemporary fiction, almost inevitably you're going to start taking on ideas and what people are looking at, and that can be a good thing because it tells you what's going on, but it can be a bad thing in terms of you feel yourself being channeled in a certain direction. So I prefer not to read.
So sorry.
I would rather read the classics that you were supposed to read at school, but you didn't read at school. I'd rather do that, because if they're going to influence you, which I mean, all reading influences you. If you're reading those, then you're not where everybody else is at any particular time. I mean, it's so easy with writers, particularly contemporary writers that you really admire. Before you know it, you're just doing pastiche of what they do, and that's not really very helpful.
No. And we're interested in kind of universal themes. We're interested in characters, but themes that are universal, that really cut across. Everyone would really have an opinion. People might have found themselves in that situation. I particularly like reading books that I think, oh my God, yeah, I remember being in that situation, or I'm in that situation at the moment, and it helps me kind of work out my stuff, or it puts me in the middle of, oh my goodness, if that happened to me, what would I do, and stuff. And we quite like, I think we both, because of we both come from working class backgrounds, we're both from backgrounds where it's not been easy to get where we're going, you know, and stuff. We really like looking at characters, morally grey areas, and the real gritty reality of life, and how people are living, and how you can just be seemingly living a very ordinary life, and then whack, around the corner something just comes at you, and it comes at you from your past. It comes at you about things and issues that you've not dealt with. It comes at you through people you've long forgotten. They haven't forgotten you, and they turn up on your doorstep, you know.
I love that. And I love this idea of Dreda, you writing in the morning, and then Ryan, you writing in the afternoon. It's almost like you're passing the baton every day.
Yes.
Go on, your turn now.
Yeah.
No, it's not the afternoon. It's more like to be deep evening before I
sleep. Yeah, but whatever. I'm not writing anymore.
I mean, I always associate writing with the dark. I don't know why.
Because you're a dark person.
Yeah, that might be it. Yes.
I like that. You need the atmosphere to match so that you can channel. You know, I was lucky enough to speak to Greer Hendricks and Sarah Pekkanen, who are 2 amazing American authors, they co-authored some books, and the way that they do it is mind-blowing. I don't think I could ever do this. They are on the phone or on Zoom every single day, writing each word as it's written together on a Google Doc.
Wow.
How they haven't killed each other, I just don't know.
No, exactly.
I don't know if that works.
No.
I can't imagine it.
No. And I think for us, we've been on our writing journey for quite a long while, and I think one of the things that we realise is there's lots we want to write about, so we've got to be efficient in terms of the use of our time as well. And I think if we were physically always writing things together, it would take us a lot longer to finish something, and we just haven't got time for that. Nor is Thomas or Mercer, I don't think. So.
I love that. Efficiency is key.
Exactly. Yeah.
So tell me, we touched a little bit on your kind of reading habits then. When you're writing books, like in your current like creative stage, you're maybe doing draft one or maybe the second draft, but before you get into the crazy edits, can you read fiction as well? Or do you have to be creatively tuned into just your book?
I can read fiction, but not crime fiction. And I'll be upfront and honest, I don't really read too much crime fiction on the whole anyway. So it's not really a problem. I read lots of romances. I love a happy ever after. You know, exactly. A couple struggling and then they finally make it. So so those are very different from the psychological domestic thrillers. So I can read fiction. I can. What about you? Can you read while you're working?
Yeah, but
I guess if you're reading 17th century French history, you're probably fine.
It's true. And can I just add, he actually reads it in German and Russian as well.
No, read French, I can't.
Are you some kind of like wild omniglot with all of these?
No, not true.
He is, because he didn't even study them at university.
Anyway,
he taught himself ancient Greek as well. So.
No, you sound like the kind of person that people avoid at parties. No, I prefer to read. I prefer to read stuff from the past and from now. One of the things I'm looking forward to when we stop doing this, I will start reading contemporary fiction. I'm looking forward to doing that, preferably in English. I would say that I don't stop reading the books that I read just because.
Yeah.
I
mean, I dare say, you know, some Dostoevsky or Tolstoy or whoever might feed into what we're doing at the moment, but that doesn't matter so much. If we were doing pastiche or other writers that are popular at the moment, then people would think, well, this just sounds like so and so down.
Yeah, of course.
I don't really go down that road personally because it's too. I mean, I'm sure some people find it quite inspirational to keep up with what's going on, and but I personally do not. I don't.
Yeah.
I'd rather, you know, I personally would rather just work independently of whatever's going on at the moment.
Or just, you know, what's just occurred to me. It's funny, I was talking to somebody about this the other day and I hadn't really clicked in. I think when I look at some of our psychological books, there's a real eeriness about them. There's a real sense about people who have died and might still be kind of spiritually around. It's kind of my Caribbean culture, you know. I was telling someone the other day, you know, it's when I go to Grenada, which is where my family are from, you know, it's no big thing to be talking to somebody rationally, and then for them to say, oh, you're a spirit came to me last night and was pinching my big toe, and you just take it in your stride and stuff. All those different kind of cultural things kind of come into play, I think, when we start reading and writing fiction. So I think all those kind of Caribbean folklore kind of fiction, which I don't read, but the stories. So when I go back to Grenada, which I do quite a lot, I'm back in that world again and stuff. So I think that feeds into how I write.
And it's perfect that you both read in such vastly different circles because
but
without comparing you to Paul and Alison, you are the kind of yin and yang of readership.
Yeah, definitely.
That is true.
Yeah,
that is true. Definitely.
And Dreda, to your point of reading about, you know, romances and struggling couples and things like that, all of that is so apparent in your crime writing because, as you said, these are domestic stories, real people dealing with real things that come out of the blue and would surprise any average Joe.
Exactly. It is really. I know you're asking us about our recommendations, but, you know, I'll never forget this. I used to read historical fiction. I mean, big bodice rippers back in the day. You know, I mean, they were really steamy back in the day when I was a teen and stuff, because they just come out, so they were revolutionary when they just come out in the 70s and the kind of the 80s. And I used to read these books as an escape from the world sometimes, because every now and again the world would feel a bit hard in the East End of London. I used to read them as an escape, but I used to learn so much. And I never forget when I was at school, this is secondary school, I think we were 12, and we had an amazing maths teacher. And he said, right, and it was Christmas, he said, right, we're going to work for half the time, and then afterwards we'll have a quiz for the rest of the lesson, which we did do. And then he said, who had done, I'll probably get this wrong, symphony for Tchaikovsky's symphony? What year was it? And of course, no one was meant to know this. Yeah. And I said 1812. And he went, oh my God, how did you know that? And I shut up immediately, because I thought, how can I tell him I learned that in a steamy romance novel set in Moscow in 1812?
God, if there's ever a general knowledge quiz, I want to be on your team. You guys have got like just brain boxes for life there.
I think that's what I used to love about those books, because I was a history buff as well, is diving into, this is what I love about fiction, is diving into a world I probably don't know much about, and maybe as well sometimes learning other things in that world, like in those historical novels, learning historical details that I would never learn about otherwise. And I think when I was growing up, what I understood about books is books can teach you about the world, even though you might not be able to move outside the world because you don't have a lot of money. And they take you into a world that you never in a million years would get into unless otherwise than through these books.
Yeah.
So I find books just revolutionary for me, and they still remain revolutionary for me.
Agreed. Okay, perfect. We will end on the final question, and it doesn't have to be crime fiction. It could be any genre that you like. What is the book that you think has either like moved you the most or changed your perception on something the most? Just something that you feel is a little bit life-changing.
For me, it's Alice Walker's The Colour Purple.
Yeah, okay.
Oh wow, The Colour Purple. I read that in my 20s. Oh my God, the range of emotions that I went through as a young Black woman: anger, laughter, railing at the world, injustice, happiness. Yes, she's going to get her happy ever after. And it was written so simply. It was written from the point of view of a 14-year-old writing in her diary. That's how it starts. And it starts off with a line, and then what our character does, because it's her diary, she puts a sentence, she puts a line through this sentence.
Scores it out.
Yeah, and I thought, I never even knew you could do that in books, because I went to a very formal Catholic girls' school in the East End of London run by nuns. And let me tell you, that was not the kind of thing you did in your book. And so it taught me about writing and reading is such a liberation. Yeah, sure, you need rules, but you step out of those rules because of the characters that you actually have. That book was just, it just liberated me. It did something for me. It really helped me get the trajectory that I needed to get onto the pathway that I needed to be. It helped me. The Colour Purple helped me reclaim the life that was being mapped out for me. Yeah.
Wow, what a recommendation, Dreda. Okay, Ryan, what have you got for us? Something completely different, no doubt.
No, not entirely. I mean, just to prove I'm not the kind of person you avoid. I would say probably it was Keith Waterhouse's Billy Liar. I think that's it's such a. I saw the film before I read the book. It was a great film. Well, it's kind of, I think, something that certain people from certain backgrounds could certainly identify with. I know a lot of people have, and it's certainly worth reading, whether you come from that kind of background or not. And the end is rather heartbreaking, really. So, yeah, that would be my choice.
And it's working class as well. I think that was important for you, if I can add.
But it is. But it's not just. It could be. I mean, it is. Yeah, that is the book, but it is also the that whole people trapped and they can't find their way out, and then they get an opportunity, but because they're trapped, they can't take the opportunity that is presented. I don't want to give spoilers here, but
No, of course.
yeah, it's kind of a situation I think young people in particular find themselves in. I think it's something that people find quite easy to identify with. Again, particularly if you come from a poor background, but also any kind of background, really.
I think it's so kind of, if I can jump in on that, it's so relevant because I think for our generation, our working class generation, there were so many opportunities that were were around. You could always guarantee that you can get housing. You wouldn't have to live with your parents for an eternity, even though there was less money around. There was lots and lots and lots of opportunities. We could go to university and not have to pay, get grants. Whereas now, I think is a very different kettle of fish for young people. So I think Billy Liar, young people would find a lot and resonate a lot with that book now.
I certainly think the experience that he went through is something that a lot of kids from middle class backgrounds, even probably quite prosperous backgrounds, would now be able to identify with in a way they couldn't in the 1960s.
Exactly.
It's a very. I'd like to see whoever publishes it republish it and promote it, because I think it's to a lot of young people in particular. So,
great.
that's my choice.
Books to add to the list. Thank you. Awesome. Well, listen, thank you so much for coming to hang out with us this afternoon. And I will pass us on to the next part of the video, which will be our reader reviews.
And last but not least, we have some reader reviews from our sleuths on the read along that's taking place over on Instagram. So let's have a look at those.
Gone is dark, atmospheric and heartfelt.
You might think that you know the missing person trope in thriller fiction, been there, read that, but let me tell you, this book is something else.
It's dark and atmospheric. Fantastic read.
It's full of despicable characters and one of the most toxic families I've ever read. I had absolutely no clue who I could trust whilst reading, which made this a really enjoyable read.
And that is it. That is a wrap on Gone the Read Along. Case file 4 officially closed. If you are unfamiliar with the Thrills and Chills book club, we have one more book to go. It is Sue Watson's His First Wife, and we'll be kicking off in June. In the meantime, if you haven't already, get your tickets to the Thrills and Chills showcase, which will be taking place on May 13th. If it's been and gone, then keep your eye out for social content, because we will be highlighting some of the best bits across our social. In the meantime, let us know what you thought of Gone in the comments below. Get your books for His First Wife if you'd like to join us and you're not part of the read along already, and keep your eyes out for the next uploads from us. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you super soon.